Chapter 655. The war between the Arcane Kingdom and the gods swept through many planes of the multiverse. Many planes were seriously damaged because of the war. The Terra plane was relatively better. At least there was no death in that plane. It was many times better than the Doomsday Setting Sun plane. According to the few words passed down by some astral world explorers, the Doomsday Setting Sun plane was almost collapsing. The whole plane was full of endless yellow sand. Only a few people were struggling to survive in the remaining oases. It was a desperate world. The plane barrier had become broken. If there were no accidents, the plane would completely die in a few hundred years at most. Sulen entered the Doomsday Mountains. He bought the map in his hand at the last wizard fair. The map not only marked the topographic map of the Doomsday Mountains, the surrounding cities, but also several other wizard fairs nearby. According to the mark on the map, Sulen went to the nearest active volcano. According to the record, the active volcano had just erupted less than a year ago. The Doomsday volcano was damaged because of the war between the Arcane Kingdom and the gods. The magma in the core of the volcano became very active. The mountains were very unstable. Earthquakes or volcanic eruptions often occurred. And for unknown reasons, the temperature of the magma in the volcano was astonishingly high. The magma was generally more than a few thousand degrees. The environment was very bad, but there were also a large number of magic creatures living there. Because of the abundant energy and the harsh environment, the magic creatures living there were generally very strong. Although it was very dangerous, a large number of wizards and adventurers came here every year to search for treasures. There were a large number of magic creatures here. Several wizard organizations around the area had set up wizard fairs here to buy and trade various materials in the Doomsday Mountains. Sulen rode the Pegasus all the way into the Doomsday Mountains. As soon as he arrived, Sulen felt that the surrounding temperature had risen by at least 10 degrees. The environment was very dry and hot. The air was filled with the smell of sulfur. The Pegasus ran as if it was running on flat ground. Some fire lizards that were looking for food were scared into the crevices of the rocks. The sky looked gray, as if it was covered with a layer of gauze. The thorny bushes on the ground were malevolent and deformed, like the claws of a devil. The Pegasus snorted and shook its head. It was obvious that it did not like this environment. The Heaven Horse's speed was very fast, and even in this environment, its speed did not decrease. After running for about half a day, Sulen saw his destination this time, the volcano that had just erupted. At this time, there was a thick layer of volcanic ash around the volcano. The cooling magma made the place look very desolate. The lava crystal that Sulen was looking for was produced here, but it was very rare. When they arrived near the volcano, the surrounding temperature became even higher. The volcano that had stopped erupting was still emitting black smoke, and the surrounding air was very turbid. There was even a large amount of poisonous gas mixed in. It could be said that the environment here was very similar to the fire elemental plane. When they arrived near the volcano, Sulen asked the Heaven Horse to find a place to play by itself. He then went to the mouth of the volcano. Although the volcanic eruption was very dangerous, it could also bring a lot of opportunities. There were all kinds of metal minerals and magic gems in the solidified magma. Many wizards and adventurers would risk their lives to collect them. Because of the eruption of the magma, these things, or enchanted materials, were often buried very shallow, so it was much easier to find them. Sulen spread out his powerful power of the will and entered the solidified magma to search. All kinds of enchanted materials and magic gems were obviously different from the magma when the power of the will scanned. As long as they were not buried too deep, a wizard could quickly find these things. Soon, it took Sulen 10 minutes to search the area carefully. In the end, he only found a few natural gold nuggets. He did not find a single magic gem. Sulen was already mentally prepared for this situation. After changing to another place, he began to search again. As time passed, the sky quickly darkened. After an afternoon of searching, Su Len searched the surrounding area, but he did not find much. Only 2 peanut-sized magic gems were found, and nothing else. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, Su Len did not continue his journey. Instead, he found a hidden area and prepared to camp. For wizards, camping in the wild was very convenient, especially for high-grade wizards. Su Len gently waved his arm, and a ray of light rose. Then, a spatial crack suddenly appeared in front of him. Sullen's Magic Mansion. The original version of this spell was the level 7 spell, Mansion. Su Len modified this spell and rebuilt a luxurious mansion, increasing the casting difficulty and mana consumption. After completing the spell, Su Len brought the Pegasus into the mansion, and the spatial crack disappeared without a trace. For more than a month, Su Len basically spent his time in his mansion. He even left a clay golem in the mansion as a servant. Although it was only a low-grade golem, the intelligence of this golem was not inferior to that of a steel golem. It was completely made according to the template of a butler. The only regret was that this golem was very bad at cooking. In the next few days, Su Len began to search in the Doomsday Mountains. Unfortunately, he searched several volcanoes in a row, but he did not find the lava crystal. Fortunately, he also obtained some magic gems and enchanted materials. At least his efforts were not in vain. After a few days of fruitless searching, Su Len planned to go to the surrounding wizard bazaars to try his luck. The production of lava crystals was very low, and there might be some in the wizard bazaar here. He rode the Pegasus to the nearest wizard bazaar. What surprised him was that the wizard bazaar in front of him was actually a small town. Looking at the scale, there were at least tens of thousands of people living in it. It was the first time Su Len had seen a wizard bazaar of such a scale. Of course, although there were tens of thousands of people, there were not many wizards inside. Most of them were ordinary people who served the wizards. Outside the wizard bazaar, a powerful barrier was set up. According to Sullen's estimation, this barrier was at least at the legendary level. After entering the bazaar, Su Len did not delay and directly found dozens of the largest shops, Alice's Magic Hut. This magic shop was a shop of a large wizard organization nearby, the Fairies' Garden. There were many enchanted materials inside. This Fairies' Garden was said to have the bloodline of fairies. It was a typical wizard organization with both warlocks and wizards, and its strength was not bad. Chapter 656. Welcome. Su Len stepped into the shop. As soon as he entered, a pretty apprentice greeted Su Len respectfully. "What can I do for you, my lord?" One of the witch apprentices said with a sweet smile and invited Su Len in. This sorcerer apprentice had a gorgeous appearance. Her skin was fair, her body was slender, and her ears were pointy. It was obvious that she was a sorcerer apprentice with fairy blood running through her veins. Generally speaking, there were very few witches among the sorcerers who were ugly. They were all very beautiful. Sorcerers had many different abilities. Even if they were originally ugly, there were too many ways to change them after becoming a sorcerer. Therefore, there were basically no ugly sorcerers. "Do you have lava crystals for sale here?" Su Len asked directly. "Lava crystal, huh? It just so happens that we received one 2 days ago. Please take a rest, sir. I'll go inform the manager." As she spoke, the apprentice smiled at Su Len. That smile looked very charming, and even Su Len felt a trace of heat rise in his heart. However, Su Len quickly frowned. Charm? She really does have fairy blood. Looking at the apprentice's figure swaying as she left, Su Len instantly reacted. This witch was born with the ability to charm people. Using charm to attract customers. No wonder her business is getting bigger and bigger. Su Len shook his head inwardly. Soon, a series of footsteps sounded. Then, a fatty who looked to be in his 40s walked in with a smile on his face. This fatty had a broad body and looked harmless. However, if one looked closely, they would find that a trace of shrewdness flashed through his eyes from time to time. "Sir, you look unfamiliar. Most likely, you came from outside the Doomsday Mountains." "Sir, you have good eyesight," Su Len said calmly. "I did come from another city and wanted to buy a few pieces of lava crystals. However, when I came here, I realized that lava crystals are not easy to buy." There are no restrictions on ordinary magic items. However, I think that kind of rare information is rarely sold even here, the manager said with a smile. "It just so happens that we still have one left." The manager waved at the apprentice next to him. The apprentice walked forward and placed a box on the table. "We just received it. You can take a look at it first." "Please." Su Len picked up the box and opened it. As soon as he opened the box, he was greeted by a wave of heat. The temperature of the room instantly increased by several degrees. Inside the box was a red magic crystal that was slightly smaller than an egg. It was the lava crystal. Su Len gently picked up the lava crystal. It was warm and comfortable to the touch. There was a scorching energy within the lava crystal. After checking it again, Su Len frowned slightly and put the lava crystal down in disappointment. "I'm sorry, but this lava crystal is not what I need," Su Len said as he slowly put down the lava crystal. "Do you have any other lava crystals in your shop? The quality of this lava crystal does not meet the requirements," Su Len asked. "I'm sorry, sir. We only have this one lava crystal now," the manager said helplessly. Su Len was a little disappointed. He could not help but ask, "Sir, please tell me where you can sell lava crystals." The manager poured a cup of black tea for Su Len and said, "Although Mount Doom is rich in all kinds of magic materials, the production of lava crystals is still very low. It's even rarer to get high-quality lava crystals." Hearing the manager's words, Su Len's heart began to sink slowly. "However, it's not like there aren't any." The manager smiled and continued, "Precious magic materials like this usually only appear in auctions and Magus trade fairs. If you're lucky enough, you'll definitely be able to find the lava crystal you're looking for. The auction is held about once every 10 years, and the Magus trade fairs are held once every 5 years. This time, it's held at another Magus market. If you want to participate, you'll have to go to Casa Magus Town." Coming out of Alice's magical hut, Su Len frowned. He then took out a sheepskin map and looked at it. Mount Doom stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Naturally, there was more than one Magus market here. The mountains here were connected, and there were volcanoes erupting almost every day. These volcanoes were of different sizes. The small ones were only the size of a bowl, and the big ones could easily contain a city. The Mount Doom was rich in resources. Many Magus organizations had set up their bases here. Casa Magus Market. Su Len looked at the marked location on the map. His expression changed slightly. He rode on his Pegasus and rushed directly to Casa Magus Town. According to the manager's information, the start of the trade fairs was very close. Casa Magus Town was also very big. It was even more bustling than the town he went to before. According to the manager, every time it was held, magi from all over the world would come to participate. It was said that the number of magi who participated in the trade fairs over the years was no less than 200. Moreover, there were often legendary items that appeared in these fairs. After passing through the town gate, Su Len slowly entered the town. Before he could observe his surroundings, he heard a voice coming from beside him. "Magus. Sir." Su Len looked down and saw a little girl with a dirty face looking at him timidly. A trace of panic flashed in her eyes, but she quickly suppressed it. After seeing Su Len's gaze, the little girl became very nervous. "Sir. Sir, do you need a guide?" As if she was too nervous, the little girl's body trembled slightly. A trace of pleading flashed in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment and took back one of her fingers. She said, "Just two, a piece of bread will do." Sullen's heart moved slightly. He took out 2 pieces of bread and a piece of roasted meat from his storage space. He jumped down from his Pegasus and squatted beside her. He looked at her with a smile and said, "How old are you? Why are you here alone?" 8 years old. Grandpa is asleep. I'm hungry. I can only come out to find food. As if she was too nervous, the little girl's body trembled slightly. A trace of pleading flashed in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment and took back one of her fingers. She said, "Just two, a piece of bread will do." Sullen's heart moved slightly. He took out 2 pieces of bread and a piece of roasted meat from his storage space. He jumped down from his Pegasus and squatted beside her. He smiled and said, "How old are you? Why are you here alone?" 8 years old. Grandpa is asleep. I'm hungry. I can only come out to find food. Chapter 657. Sulen sighed in his heart. If he was right, this little girl's grandfather had most likely passed away. Looking at the skinny little girl in front of him, Sulen said softly, "Where is your home? I'll send you home to meet your grandfather first." "Okay." The little girl hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said. Sulen led the Pegasus and followed the little girl into the town. Soon, the 2 of them came to a low and cramped shack area. The people living here were at the bottom of the wizard market. Many ordinary people were unwilling to leave after coming into contact with wizards. They dreamed of becoming a wizard one day. Of course, this was not impossible. There were people who were tested to have the potential to be a wizard. In the end, they were accepted as an apprentice by a wizard organization and became a wizard. However, most people only had wishful thinking. The little girl stopped outside a dilapidated wooden house, and then pushed open the crumbling door. The house was very small, and the light was dim. As soon as Sulen entered, he smelled a faintly discernible rancid smell. "Grandpa, Nini is back. She also brought back delicious food. Grandpa, don't sleep. Eat some." The little girl walked to the bed and shook it twice, but her grandfather did not move. Sulen sighed in his heart. He saw very clearly that the old man on the bed had been dead for a long time. There were even many livor mortis spots on his thin body. "Grandpa, don't ignore Nini. Nini will be obedient, Grandpa, try it. This bread is very fragrant, and this barbecue is delicious. Eat it and you won't be hungry anymore, Grandpa." Sulen walked forward, squatted down and patted the little girl's head. "Nini, your grandpa is asleep. Eat these things yourself." "But Grandpa hasn't eaten for a few days," Nini said hesitantly. "Grandpa is already asleep. He doesn't need these things. Next, we need to find a place for him to sleep." Looking at the confused little girl, Sulen explained. Next, Sulen spent some kinnar to find a few workers to help the little girl bury her grandpa. Then, he left the alley. After seeing this, Nini seemed to understand something in her heart and silently followed Sulen. After arranging the funeral of Nini's grandpa, Sulen came to a rented house under her lead. There was still some time before the trade fair, so he needed to stay here for a while. Sulen rented a separate house, which was specially prepared for wizards. Not only did it have all kinds of living facilities, but it also had an independent laboratory for experiments. After everything was done, Sulen thought and asked. "Nini, have you tested for aptitude?" "Testing for aptitude." The little girl shook her head and said shyly. "Then I'll test for you." Sulen smiled and took out a crystal ball from his storage space that was used to test the aptitude of a magus. "Put your hand on it and focus." The little girl hesitated for a moment, then shyly put her hand on the crystal ball under Sulan's encouraging gaze. "Close your eyes and focus," Sulan said with a smile. After seeing Sulan's smile, the little girl nodded and closed her eyes. After about half a minute, there was no reaction from the crystal ball. Just when Sulan thought that the little girl did not have the aptitude to become a wizard, a light slowly lit up from the crystal ball. Then, the light became brighter and brighter, until it lit up the entire room. In this light, there were some blue, red, and green lights. After a while, these lights gradually disappeared. "It's done," Sulan said with a smile. The little girl looked at Sulan in confusion. "She's a 5th grade aptitude." Sulan looked at Nini with a face full of surprise. The 5th grade aptitude was the classification of the aptitude of wizards. The 5th grade aptitude was the highest, and the 1st grade aptitude was the lowest. Because Sulan had the system, when he tested himself, he was a 5th grade aptitude. However, this did not mean that there were many 5th grade aptitudes. Among the more than 1,000 apprentices in the Northern Wind Academy, most of them were 3rd grade aptitudes. There were only 2 4th grade aptitudes in the entire academy, and not a single one was 5th grade. In the Northern Wind Tower, only Hathaway and Sulan had 5th grade aptitudes. The other one was Alex. However, she was a divine creature. After fusing with her divinity, her aptitude was not inferior to a 5th grade aptitude, or even stronger. He did not expect that after a long trip, he would suddenly show some kindness and take in a little girl with 5th grade aptitude. The aptitude of a wizard was very important in the early stages. A 5th grade aptitude could meditate and advance quickly. As long as there were no problems, becoming a 4th grade wizard was not a problem. It was much better than those 1st grade or 2nd grade apprentices. Many apprentices who only had 1st grade or 2nd grade aptitudes could not even touch the threshold of a high-grade wizard in their entire lives. As for becoming a legendary wizard, it was not a matter of aptitude. There was also a little bit of luck. After becoming a legendary wizard, aptitude was no longer important. At this time, aptitude was more important. In other words, as long as one had 5th grade aptitude, as long as they continued to practice, they would definitely become a high-grade wizard. The little girl looked at Sulan with a nervous expression. As someone who lived in the wizard market, she naturally knew about the aptitude test. After seeing that the test was over, she looked at Sulan with a nervous expression. Sulan smiled and squatted down to the same height as her. Then he said, "Nini, what is your name?" "My name is Nini." The little girl looked at Sulan with a strange expression. Sulan smiled and pinched her little face. "Nini is a nickname. You still need a formal name." "A formal name?" The little girl tilted her head and looked at Sulan. Then she shook her head. "Then I'll give you one," Sulan said with a smile. "Okay. How about Vinia?" "Her nickname is Nini," Sulan said. "Vinia, I'll be called Vinia from now on," Nini said happily. She was obviously very satisfied with this name. After adopting Vinia, it could be said that from today onwards, her fate would be completely different. If she did not meet Sulan, the little girl would very likely have died in some corner of this wizard market. Even if she had 5th grade aptitude, if no one knew, there would be no change. Sulan planned to send the little girl to the Northern Wind Academy to study. She was still young and could slowly build her foundation. With the guidance of so many wizards, as long as there were no accidents, she would definitely become a legendary wizard. Chapter 658. Since Nini was still young and her soul had not yet stabilized, Sulan did not enlighten her too early. The best time to start learning was from the age of 10, but before that, he could let her know about all kinds of wizardry knowledge. At first, Sulan thought taking care of a young child would be troublesome, but to his surprise, Nini was very smart and sensible. She didn't need him to take care of her at all. She even took care of him, the young master. In the end, Su Len couldn't take it anymore. He spent money to hire a maid to take care of their daily life. Then, he began to teach the little girl how to read. The first language she learned was the common language of the continent, then the Nesser language, the demon language, the heavenly language, and the Byron language. These were the basics of wizardry. A qualified wizard would need to master more than 10 languages. After all, a lot of magic information was recorded in these languages. The little girl was very smart and had a good memory. She could remember all the knowledge Su Len taught her 2 or 3 times. Although she was not as good as Su Len and Hathaway, there was not much difference. Seeing this, Su Len was very surprised. This little girl was a potential wizard. After living in this wizard town for about a month, the long-awaited wizard trade fair was finally going to start. After telling Nini to stay at home to study and not go out, Su Len went to the trading hall in the wizard market. In order to participate in the trade fair, one had to be a wizard and buy a ticket. The ticket price was not cheap. It was equivalent to 10,000 kinars worth of magic crystals or gems. Of course, this was not a problem for Su Luan. He arrived at the trade fair hall. As expected of the trade fair held once every 5 years. Su Luan hurriedly looked around. There were about 300 wizards in the hall. Although half of them were low-grade wizards, there were only a few high-grade wizards. As for legendary wizards, Su Len did not see any of them. Legendary wizards were very busy, and more than 80% of them were otakus. There was almost no one like Su Len who liked to wander around. Normally, legendary wizards would rarely participate in this kind of trade fair, but they would usually send their disciples or representatives. After all, this sort of trade fair, which was held once every few years, would often have some good items. As a new face, Su Len did not have many acquaintances at this trade fair, so no one came to disturb him. Su Len found a quiet place to sit down and waited quietly. After sitting down, Su Len kept observing the wizards around him. Many of them were obviously regulars here. They were chatting with their friends and introducing other wizards from time to time. Su Len was obviously interested in the news as well. He was eavesdropping on the conversation. Soon, he had a general understanding of the adepts around him. A few of them were very strong in Beijing, and they were backed by legendary wizards. Most of them were disciples of legendary wizards, and you could tell from their arrogant expressions. The highest profile wizard was actually a direct descendant of a legendary wizard. This wizard was a grade 4 wizard and was the son of a legendary wizard. It was important to note that after advancing into an adept, the fertility of an adept would greatly decrease. This kind of fertility would become more and more difficult to achieve. After becoming a legendary wizard, the chances of having a descendant would be even lower. It was 1,000 times harder for a legendary wizard to have a descendant than a normal person. However, once a descendant was born, they would receive a lot of benefits. Their aptitude would be at least grade 4, and even grade 5 would not be rare. Who is that adept? One of the adepts asked softly. Another wizard followed his gaze and quickly whispered, "That's Meister, from the Brandon family. His father is the Sage of Fire. Don't offend him. This guy is very vengeful, and he has a legendary wizard behind him. It can be said that no one dares to offend him." With that wizard's whisper, Su Len roughly understood the basic information of this Meister. Meister's father, the Sage of Fire, spent countless resources and finally succeeded in giving birth to a child, which was Meister in front of him. To have a son at such an old age and to be a sorcerer's seed, one could imagine how much the Sage of Fire doted on him. Moreover, he himself was a grade 4 sorcerer with great strength. There were also a few wizards who were representatives of other wizard organizations. It could be said that the qualifications of the entire trade fair were very high. The trade fair has begun. Just as Su Len was observing, the trade fair finally began. As the host of this trade fair, the representative of this wizard fair was the first to walk on stage. It was a curvaceous blonde beauty. Her face was beautiful, and her skin was white. She could be said to be very beautiful, and her strength was at the high grade. As the host, it was natural to throw out a brick to attract the jade. The blonde beauty walked on stage and directly asked someone to take out 3 brocade boxes and open them. One of the boxes contained a purple soul crystal, the second box contained a small green sapling, and the last box contained an earth crystal. Seeing the earth crystal, Sulen was a little surprised. This kind of thing was rare. You are all wizards, so you don't need me to pass on the message. There are 3 treasures in front of you. These treasures can be exchanged for water elemental crystals of the same grade or magic items of the same grade. The market in front of them also did not accept kinnar, only magic items. Earth crystal? Good stuff. Just as everyone was about to bid, a voice said, just in time. I'll take it. Sir, I need this earth crystal. I'll use this to exchange for it. What do you think? As he spoke, the wizard took out a fist-sized magic pearl. The magic pearl was full of water vapor and energy. It was obviously a high-quality magic pearl. This magic pearl is a special product of our wizard academy. Only high-grade magic clams can breed it. It's a very good water elemental material. The blonde beauty nodded and said, it is indeed very good. How many are you willing to exchange for it? The wizard thought for a moment and said, 10 magic pearls of the same grade as this one, or not lower than this one. What do you think? Sulen looked at the magic pearl carefully. This kind of magic pearl would cost about 100,000 kinnar worth of magic materials. 10 of them were equivalent to 1 million kinnar. Too low. At least 12. The magus hesitated for a moment before nodding his head in agreement. 12 it is. Chapter 659. Magic pearls of this quality were good stuff. They could be used to make some magic tools or set up some large-scale magic runes or magic runes. However, these were not their most important uses. The most important use of magic pearls was to make youth potions. This potion could not increase the power of the will or break through bottlenecks. However, it had one effect, eternal youth. After taking this potion, one's body would remain active. As long as one did not die, they would always be in a youthful state. In addition to these effects, the youth potion also had some beautifying effects, such as making the skin white and tender. Although this potion could not increase the power of the will, it was not cheap at all. It could be said that the witches were crazy about this potion. It had to be said that no matter the time, women's pursuit of beauty was crazy. In the eyes of many wizards, this potion was completely a waste of resources, but the price was shockingly high. Seeing that the first round of transactions had been completed, the next 2 items were quickly bid on. The high-grade soul crystal was exchanged for a magic wand, and the remaining sapling was a magic willow. It was a plant-type magic beast that was similar to a tree ant. It could be used to guard a house, and the trunk of this magic willow was a very good enchantment material. However, the prerequisite was that this magic willow had to be raised. This plant-type magic beast usually took dozens or even hundreds of years to grow. If it was not a wizard organization or a wizard family, basically no one would raise this kind of creature. After the first person completed the transaction, the venue became lively. Then, the second wizard went on stage and took out the item he was going to trade. It was a very simple item, just a magic scroll. However, the items that could be traded here were not cheap. The Heart of Lava meditation technique. It can increase the affinity of shadow and fire elemental energy. It has a 7th circle, an 8th circle, and a legendary spell. I'll trade it for a bottle of elemental essence. As soon as the voice of this magus fell, the entire venue immediately began to scramble for it. Elemental essence could be called a heavenly treasure. Its function was to increase a magus elemental affinity and improve a magus aptitude. Of course, it could only be raised to grade 4, but even so, it was still very precious. In the end, the Heart of Lava meditation technique was purchased by a magus family at a high price. Not only did they pay an elemental essence, but they also paid 100,000 kinner worth of magical materials. After that, one magus after another went up to trade. There were even 1 or 2 items that caught Sullen's attention. Although these items were precious, they were not the lava crystals that Sulen wanted. As time went by, there were fewer and fewer wizards who had yet to make a deal. Sulen was getting a little anxious. However, at this moment, Sulen suddenly heard a wizard on the stage say, 1 top-grade lava crystal for true dragon blood essence or a bloodline of the same level. Hearing this, Sullen's eyes lit up. He didn't expect that what he wanted would really appear. As soon as the top-grade lava crystal appeared, many wizards wanted to buy it. One of them took out the blood essence of a grade 4 frost Quetzalcoatlus and some other things, but he was still rejected. Another wizard took out a bottle of legendary sea monster blood. Seeing that the person was interested, Sulen immediately took out a bottle of red blood and said, 1 bottle of white dragon blood from the ancient dragon stage in exchange for this lava crystal. White dragon blood from the ancient dragon stage. Hearing Sullen's words, a trace of surprise flashed across the wizard's face. He couldn't wait and said, as long as it's confirmed that it's white dragon blood from the ancient dragon stage, we can make the exchange immediately. True dragon blood was very rare, but it wasn't impossible. For example, finding some dragon creatures to purify the blood, but there was a limit to this kind of purification. In order to obtain true dragon blood, it had to be at least a legendary dragon descendant. Sullen's bottle of white dragon blood was from the ancient dragon stage, and its effect was far stronger than that of ordinary legendary dragon blood. It could be said that it had exceeded the target that he wanted to exchange. Morton looked at the bottle of dragon blood that contained rich energy in Sullen's hand, and his eyes were full of enthusiasm. He thought to himself, dragon blood from the ancient dragon stage. Although it's from a white dragon, it's still not bad. It'll definitely be good to use it to make dragon blood potions. With my qualifications, it's impossible to rely on a wizard to advance to legendary. However, if I have this bottle of dragon blood, the success rate of advancing to legendary by relying on a dragon disciple warlock is still very high. A legendary dragon disciple warlock is not inferior to a legendary wizard in the slightest. Moreover, he can establish a warlock family and even control a country behind the scenes. At the thought of this, Morton's heart was full of enthusiasm. He smiled and said, "No problem at all. I agree to the exchange." As he said that, he handed the top-grade lava crystal to Sulen, ready to exchange for the dragon blood. "Wait." Sulen stopped. "The value of my bottle of dragon blood is higher than your lava crystal. You can't afford the difference." This. Morton was a little hesitant, but after glancing at the bottle of dragon blood, he immediately nodded and agreed. "I can compensate you with 20,000 kinnars worth of enchanted materials." "Okay." Sulen nodded and agreed. Since the price had been discussed, the two quickly completed the exchange after confirming that there was no problem with the item. Sulen held the fist-sized lava crystal in his hand and sighed in relief. After the exchange was completed, Sulen was not in a hurry to leave here. He had to bring some gifts back for a long trip, didn't he? Otherwise, the few people at home would be in a mess. Sulen already had a target. The enchanted pearls that the wizard used to exchange were pretty good. Although Hathaway, Chris, Alex, and Karina were all long-lived species and could be regarded as eternal youth, no woman would refuse to become more beautiful. Therefore, Sulen planned to buy or trade some enchanted pearls from the wizard. Soon, Sulan found the wizard and used 100 milliliters of spring water and some other magical materials to exchange for 5 enchanted pearls. It was not that he did not want to exchange for more, but the key was that these were the last 5 enchanted pearls he had. The production of enchanted pearls was not high. It was mainly produced by a special kind of enchanted clam. If one could obtain an enchanted clam, it was equivalent to obtaining an endless source of wealth. Of course, enchanted clams also had a limited lifespan. There were many of them in the hands of the sea folk. Sulan found some pearl clams in the sea of the eastern continent and wanted to cultivate enchanted clams. Unfortunately, the experiment ended in failure. Chapter 660. After the trade, Sulan left the venue. Many wizards who were returning from a rewarding journey were in a hurry. Many of them did not stop and left the wizard town directly. After all, there were always people in this world who wanted to do business without any cost. Just a moment ago, he noticed that a few wizards had left with the other wizards. Obviously, these people were going to leave this place and make a move. When Sulan returned to the courtyard, the little girl was still studying in the study room. When she saw Sulan coming back, the little girl immediately came up to him. "Uncle, you're back." "Yes, pack your things. We're going home tomorrow," Sulan said as he reached out and carried the little girl up. "Home. Home." Sulan pinched the little girl's nose and said with a smile, "You've been studying hard. Before we go home, I'll take you out to play." The little girl was only 8 years old this year. She was at the age where she liked to play. During this period of time, she had been suppressing her studies. When she heard that Sulan wanted to take her out to play, she immediately cheered. Sulan brought the little girl out of the courtyard. This guy had been in the courtyard for almost a month, and it was getting impatient. When it saw Sulan was about to go out, it immediately bit Sulan's sleeve and refused to let go. Seeing that the Pegasus was acting like a rascal, Sulan had no choice but to let it go. The two of them strolled around the market together. The wizard market was very busy. Other than the things that wizards used, there were also many things that ordinary people needed. After all, wizards also needed to eat. The little girl had been bored for a long time. When she came out, she was very active. She was holding snacks in one hand and Sulan's big hand in the other. Her eyes were squinting like crescent moons. "What is that?" At this moment, a man not far away suddenly had a flash of inspiration in his eyes. He looked at the horse beside Sulan and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. He quickly ran up and stopped Sulan. "Sir, please wait a moment." Suddenly, a shadow appeared in front of Sulan and blocked his way. After seeing who it was, Sulan's eyebrows furrowed. He had seen this wizard before. It was the very high-profile Wizard Meister at the trade fair not long ago. Wizard Meister glanced at Sulan and turned his gaze towards the Pegasus behind Sulan. A flash of greed flashed in his eyes as he spoke to Sulan in an arrogant tone. "Is that your horse? It looks pretty good. I just happen to be lacking a fine horse. If you sell this horse to me, I can give you 10,000 kinnar, or an equivalent magic item." "Pooh!" When the Pegasus behind him heard his words, it snorted in dissatisfaction and even made a move to kick him. Sulan stroked the Pegasus' head to comfort it before turning to Meister with a calm expression. "This horse is my mount. I will not sell it." "Not sell?" After hearing Sulan's words, a cold light flashed in Meister's eyes. He then snorted coldly, "Do you know who I am? In the Doomsday Mountain Range, the Brandon family is the ruler. You only have 2 choices. Either you accept the friendship of the Brandon family, or you become the enemy of the Brandon family." A flash of murderous intent flashed in Sulan's eyes. Ever since he became a legendary, no one had dared to talk to him like this. Even the chief wizard of the Stellar Spire spoke to him as an equal. This was the first time he had been verbally threatened since he became a legend, and it was from a wizard who had yet to reach the legendary level. Although Meister had the backing of the Brandon family, and his father was the Sage of Fire, a legendary wizard, Meister was still not a legendary. It was a miracle that someone as arrogant as him could survive until now. Most legendary wizards like to stay at home. If Meister had offended a legendary wizard, he would have been killed on the spot. Even if his father, the Sage of Fire, came to find him, it would still be difficult. With the strength of a legendary wizard, it was hard to say who would win. After all, as a legendary wizard, who didn't have a few trump cards in their hands? Su Luan was very clear about how powerful a legendary wizard could be when he was prepared. Even if he didn't offend a legendary wizard, if he offended a rank 4 great wizard, he would be killed without hesitation. This was especially true for wizards who came from other regions. They could just run away as soon as they were done. The Sage of Fire wouldn't even be able to catch up with them. Meister's arrogance was completely the style of a spoiled brat. He had grown up in a greenhouse, and the Brandon family had protected him too well. He had never tasted the cruelty of society. Since everyone wanted to teach him a lesson, Su Len would take it upon himself to teach him a lesson about the evils of society. After glancing at Meister, Su Len didn't make a move. After all, this was the wizard market, and there was a wizard organization behind it. It wouldn't be good to smash the shop after buying something here. I said, I'm not selling. As for the friendship of the Brandon family? How much is it for 500 grams? After saying that, Su Len didn't want to talk to a dead man. He turned around and left with the little girl and the Pegasus. Seeing that Su Len had ignored him, Meister's face turned green. His eyes were burning with anger. He raised his hand and was about to make a move, but he was stopped by a wizard beside him. Meister, this is the wizard market. Behind this wizard market is the lava valley. If we make a move here, we won't be able to get away with it. When the time comes, we'll have to ask the family leader to come out. Meister's face turned even uglier. Although the Brandon family was powerful, the wizard organizations around them were not to be trifled with. Although the other wizard organizations didn't have legendary wizards, the Lava Valley did. If they made a move, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. The Lava Valley wouldn't give face to the Brandon family. After all, this would be destroying the reputation of the Lava Valley. The wizard beside him saw that Meister had calmed down and secretly let out a sigh of relief. Although Meister was arrogant, he wouldn't attack someone for no reason. What was going on today? What happened to you just now? That's a Pegasus. Meister said softly, suppressing his desire to make a move. Meister was born with a pair of spiritual eyes. He could see through many things, including the essence of some things. This was a mutation in his bloodline. Although Sullen's Pegasus was disguised and looked no different from an ordinary horse, Meister could see through it at a glance. Chapter 661. Pegasi and unicorns were heavenly creatures, and they were very similar. Pegasi had an extra pair of wings, while unicorns had an extra horn. The unicorn's horn and the blood of the Pegasus had a lot of divine effects. Although their strength was good, they were still hunted in large numbers. In fact, by the time of the Arcane Empire, these two creatures had rarely appeared in the material plane. In ancient times, because these two creatures had divinity, they were captured in large numbers. Later, these creatures left the material plane and followed the Master God of Order to Mountain Paradise, where they lived since then. Only a few lived in the elven forest. Of course, there was a very small chance of encountering them in other places. Yes, they were also the mounts of paladins. The female paladins' mounts were unicorns, while the male paladins' mounts were Pegasi. Of course, only a few paladins could gain their favor. Before the Arcane Empire, wizards generally extracted divinity from unicorns, divine spirits, indigenous demigods, and so on. The divinity carried by these divine creatures did not have so much negative consciousness. It was easy to absorb and not easy to be corrupted. But the problem was that divine creatures could not reproduce in large numbers like other creatures. Their numbers were limited. Later on, the number of divine creatures became fewer and fewer. Wizards then turned their attention to abominations, ancient evils, and demigod liches. The divinity in these monsters could be said to be a big problem. Although there were a lot of them, if they were not careful, they would be affected by the remnant will, and then be corrupted. Eventually, they would even become something similar to ancient evils. The moment Meister saw the Pegasi, he had made up his mind to take the Pegasi. Father is already a legendary wizard. It will be more difficult for him to continue to become stronger. If I can send the Pegasi this time, Father will be more powerful after extracting the divinity from it. The remaining materials of the Pegasi can be exchanged for some resources. Maybe it won't be long before I set foot in the realm of legends. Even if there is no chance for the time being, with Father, I will definitely advance into the realm of legends. By then, we will have 2 legends in our family. The entire Doomsday Mountains will be under our control. At the thought of this, Meister's heart was burning. He looked in the direction where Su Len left, and his eyes were even crazier. Meister was born with a pair of spiritual eyes. In addition to seeing through all kinds of illusions, he could see the origin of matter. This was not only useful in battle, but also in all kinds of magic experiments, especially in refining potions. With this pair of spiritual eyes, he could understand the essence of potions more accurately, so he could grasp the best time to perform the operation, and greatly increase the success rate when refining potions. Or, when making magic items, the runes on the items would be better planned, and the various materials would fuse more perfectly. It could be said that having a pair of spirit eyes was very beneficial to a magus. So far, none of the adepts and apprentice adepts in Northern Town City possessed such a spirit eye. The wizard next to Meister was also surprised. He also knew the value of a Pegasus. After learning that Su Luan's horse was a Pegasus, his heart also became restless. Still, he frowned and whispered, "Meister, I saw that wizard not long ago at the trade fair. He just got a top-grade lava crystal, and he even used the blood of an ancient white dragon to exchange for it. I'm afraid he's not a pushover to be able to take out something so precious. Judging from that guy's aura and energy, he must be very powerful. We might not be able to defeat him. Should we go tell the family leader and let him deal with him personally? Father is in the middle of an important experiment, so he won't be able to come for a while. Also, this guy might leave soon. We need to do it as soon as possible. Don't worry about the 2 of us not being able to defeat him. I still have a few cards that Father gave me. One of them should be enough to deal with him," Meister said with a cold face. He was an arrogant person, and he would not allow anyone to go against his words. Su Luan's energy fluctuations were very strong, and he looked very young. This kind of wizard was basically not weak, and it was very likely that he had a powerful force behind him. If it was any other time, he wouldn't provoke this kind of person, but this time, the thing that appeared was too important. It was about the future of the family, and it was about the prosperity of the family. It was impossible to expect someone else to give it away. You had to fight for it yourself. Although the continent was not small, resources were limited. If you wanted more, then I would take less. If you wanted to grow stronger, then you had to fight for more resources. Why did all the major adept organizations have enemies? Apart from the difference in factions and the concept of right and wrong, the biggest reason was because of the various resources and benefits. As a descendant of a legendary wizard, Meister was usually very arrogant and domineering. He would not hesitate to fight for large amounts of resources. He did whatever he wanted, and it was very easy for him to offend people. Now that he saw a Pegasus, how could he hold back? That was almost impossible. That heavenly horse is something I must get. It's related to the prosperity of our Brandon family. My brother is proficient in tracking magic and has extraordinary strength. If we work together, we will definitely be able to successfully kill it. Please help me. After it's done, I will personally tell my father about it and give you more cultivation resources in the family. Meister said directly. All right. After a moment of silence, the wizard from the Brandon family agreed. But don't be impulsive. Give me some time to find out more about him. Then I'll leave it to you, brother. Meister finally smiled when he heard that the wizard had agreed to help. After being spoiled by a fly, Sulen did not continue to stroll around. He brought the little girl and the Pegasus back to the small courtyard he rented. In the next 2 days, Sulen bought some other things in the wizard market. Then, he left the wizard market with the little girl. As soon as he left the wizard bazaar, Su Luan directly opened the storage space and released several investigative eyes. In the past 2 days in the wizard bazaar, he found that someone had been following and observing him. Although that person's spells were very clever and his movements were very concealed, Su Luan still easily found him. Although his hiding ability was very strong, Su Len had the talent of the sixth sense. In addition, he was much stronger than the person who was following him. From the first time he was followed, Su Len found out. Chapter 662. As soon as Su Len left the wizard bazaar with the little girl, Meister was the first to receive the news. They're leaving so soon? How's the information gathering going? Meister asked with a frown. The wizard from the Brandon family said with a serious face, it's a little tricky. Time is tight, and the target is a stranger. He's not from the Doomsday Mountain Range, and he doesn't know anyone here. The information I can gather is limited. Humph. Meister snorted coldly. So what if we didn't get any information? Look at his skeletal age, he's not even 30 years old. How strong can a wizard this young be? At most, he's only a high-grade wizard. With the 2 of us, and the trump card that father gave us, even a grandmaster wizard wouldn't be a problem. Meister snorted coldly, then continued. Also, he brought a little girl with him. That little girl is just an ordinary person. How can she be a match for us? Let's go and get the Pegasus first. After Su Len released the Eye of Detection, it immediately entered the high-grade invisibility mode. The Eye of Detection was very small, and it was basically the size of a human's eye. In this kind of mountain range environment, it was even harder to detect. After releasing the Eye of Detection, Su Len didn't stop. He reached out and picked up the little girl, jumped on the horse, and galloped away. Less than 2 minutes after he left, 2 familiar figures appeared. Through the Eye of Detection, Su Len could clearly see all the movements of the 2 people behind them. They really dare to chase after me. Seeing the 2 figures that suddenly appeared in his mind, Su Len sneered in his heart. The image transmitted by the Eye of Detection was very clear, and it could directly see every movement of the target. It could be said that this was one of the best ways to monitor. Looks like I'll have to take care of them before I leave. A trace of killing intent flashed in Sulen's eyes. To those who dared to reach out their claws to him, Su Len wouldn't be polite. It's just 2 high-grade magi. Since you want to die, I'll send you on your way. With that thought in mind, Su Len lightly knocked on the horse's abdomen. The heaven horse jumped up and flew into the air. Then, it rushed towards the east. In fact, Su Len had originally planned to teleport directly, but with the little girl here, it would be very dangerous to do so. When the teleportation array broke through the void, the pressure was immense. Ordinary people's hands would not be able to withstand this pressure, and it would cause their blood vessels to rupture. Under normal circumstances, there would be special teleportation doors at both ends of the teleportation array. These teleportation doors would not only serve as coordinates, but also reduce the pressure of the teleportation array. With this kind of fixed teleportation array, even ordinary people could teleport without worrying about problems. In the Doomsday Mountain Range, in the west of the continent, Su Len did not make a rune transmission array at all, let alone a transmission door. If he wanted to take the little girl away, he could only ride the Pegasus back. It really is a heavenly horse. A hint of greed flashed in Meister's eyes. Not good, the Pegasus is very fast, we can't delay. Meister suddenly said. Hurry up and take out the flying carpets. Let's catch up to them. All right. The wizard from the Brandon family waved his hand and took out a carpet that was flashing with the light of magic. As soon as the carpet appeared, it opened up on its own and floated on the ground. The two of them sat on the magic carpet. The magic carpet flashed and immediately rose. After reaching a certain height, with a whoosh, it chased in the direction Su Len had just left. 4 crystals floated on the 4 corners of the magic carpet. With a flash of light, a protective shield rose from the crystals and blocked the cold wind outside. The flying magic carpet was very fast, much faster than the flying spells of high-grade wizards. This was not because of the flying carpet's speed. The flying carpet could change its speed according to the amount of energy that was injected. If more energy was injected, the speed of the flying carpet would increase. If less energy was injected, the speed of the flying carpet would decrease. Of course, the speed of the flying carpet could not be increased infinitely. After reaching a certain speed, no matter how much energy was injected, it would not increase its speed. This limit was close to the speed of sound. This was mainly due to the air resistance during flight. In their current position, in the atmosphere, it was very difficult for wizards to break through the sound barrier. Of course, it was not impossible to do so. For example, using anti-gravity spells and some other runes, one could break through the sound barrier in the main material world. However, the gains would not make up for the losses, and the cost would be too high. Using the flying carpet at close range was no problem at all. As for longer distances, of course, teleportation would be used. Teleportation could be easily traversed as long as one had the coordinates. Because of this, there were very few people in the material world who would study how to increase the speed of flight. The flying carpet's speed in the material world was close to the speed of sound. In the astral plane, without the suppression of the laws, the flying carpet could reach sublight speed. Of course, this method was meaningless. In the astral plane, a single teleportation could cross tens of millions of kilometers. Flying was basically on the verge of being eliminated. However, flying tools were still very popular in the material world, especially this type of flying carpet. It was comfortable and fast, and much better than the brooms used by some wizard organizations. Flying brooms were one of the less valuable flying tools. They were not very fast, and they had no protective barriers. The seats were also very simple. The only advantage they had was their low price. The flying carpet was very fast. Su Len could see the 2 people on the flying carpet cursing as they sped up. The Pegasus was very fast. It did not take long for them to leave the wizard market far behind. On the other hand, the speed of the magic carpet was also very fast. The Pegasus and the magic carpet were like 2 meteors streaking across the sky. However, in comparison, the speed of the magic carpet was still faster. Galloping a Pegasus also consumed physical strength, but in addition to using its own magic power, the magic carpet could also use energy crystals as a substitute. In order to catch up with Su Len, Meister had already used energy crystals as a substitute. The two were adjusting themselves to their best condition, waiting for the Pegasus to slow down. Although the Pegasus was very powerful as a divine creature, its own energy was also consumed. Naturally, it could not be compared to the energy crystals used by the flying carpet. Su Len did not plan to use the Pegasus to escape. He just wanted to lure the two to a suitable place. The Pegasus had been bored for a long time and wanted to run. Soon, the Pegasus would be tired, and it would be time for the two to die. Chapter 663. The two groups of people continued to fly in the sky, one in front and one behind. They were like two meteors that streaked across the sky. Su Len flew for thousands of kilometers until he reached the Sunset Mountains. He then patted the Pegasus to stop. Hush! After running to its heart's content, the Pegasus snorted happily and shook its head before stopping in midair. Su Len patted the little girl's head. Ride the Pegasus and don't move. I'll come back after I've dealt with the two guys behind us. The Pegasus will protect you. Uncle, when will you be back? The little girl asked reluctantly. I'll be back soon. Don't worry. Su Len smiled and pinched the little girl's cheek. He then let the Pegasus run into the forest below and hide with the little girl. As soon as he was done, the two people behind him caught up. When they saw Su Len, they laughed maniacally. Kid, you can't run anymore, right? Hand over the Pegasus. If I'm in a good mood, I might even let you. Boom. Before Meister could finish his words, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky. The lightning was so fast that it appeared in front of them before they could react. Watch out. The other wizard's expression changed. He immediately activated the defensive runic array on the flying magic carpet. An energy barrier appeared in front of them and blocked the lightning. However, the power of the lightning was beyond their imagination. The barrier, which could withstand the full power of a seventh circle spell, shattered like glass under the attack of the lightning. Meister and the other wizards' expressions changed. The seventh circle defensive spell was broken directly. This person's strength was obviously beyond their expectations. You're a fourth-tier great wizard. Meister shouted loudly. Why are you shouting so loudly? Are you looking for help? This is a place with good feng shui that I specially selected for you. You don't have to thank me. Su Luan smiled. Your magic carpet is not bad, but it'll be mine soon. Humph, you're shameless. Go to hell. A ferocious glint flashed across Meister's eyes as he took out a magic scroll and activated it. The surface of the magic scroll had a dark golden brilliance, and the mana fluctuations on it were very astonishing. There was at least an 8th level spell sealed inside. Raging Firestorm. The dazzling light of the spell flashed and shrouded Su Len. Su Len frowned slightly. Then, a ray of light rose and blocked the spell. The raging flame storm was indeed powerful. The endless flames were like a rain of fire, forming a flaming tornado that fell from the sky. However, after touching the elemental barrier in front of Su Len, they all dissipated. How can a great wizard be so powerful? This is the trump card my father gave me. It contains a strand of his consciousness. Even a tier 4 great mage won't be able to stop it, unless he's a mythic. A hint of surprise flashed across Meister's ferocious face. Then, his expression changed drastically. He didn't have time to say anything. He immediately took out another magic scroll that wasn't inferior to the previous one and was about to activate it. However, just as he took out the magic scroll, his body suddenly froze. Trying to run? Did you ask for my permission? A cold voice sounded in his ear. Then, he saw a hand reach out and easily take the magic scroll in his hand. A teleportation scroll? You're quite generous. Su Len took the magic scroll and examined it. It was a teleportation scroll. Once activated, it could teleport the user to a distance of 2,000 kilometers. The craftsmanship of this magic scroll was very good. Moreover, the runic circle was engraved with a spell that could resist the dimensional anchor. If the person who cast the dimensional anchor was not a legendary, the teleportation spell would not be interrupted. It could be said that this was one of the trump cards used to escape. However, before Meister could use it, Su Len had directly used the human immobilization spell to control him. This magic scroll became his spoils of war. Not bad. I'll take it as payment for burying it. Su Len directly put the magic scroll into his pocket. A magic scroll like this could be sold for at least 300,000 kinnar in the wizard market, or even more. Alright, we've wasted a lot of time. It's time to end this. Su Len clapped his hands. Then, a bright flash of lightning fell from the sky. The ferocious look on Maester's face had long since disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by fear. He struggled desperately to break free from the spell, but it was destined to be futile. Soon, his consciousness fell into darkness, and he was completely submerged by the endless thunder and lightning. When the lightning dissipated, the place where the two wizards originally stood was empty. Only a pile of gray powder was left. A gentle breeze blew, and everything disappeared without a trace. This lightning is so convenient. It's even better than cremation. What's this called? Did you scatter the ashes? Su Len clapped his hands. Good control of the force. The two portal bags are not damaged. Su Len then waved his hand and took the flying magic carpet and the two portal bags. After a simple inspection, the flying magic carpet was a little damaged. When he broke the magic carpet's protective barrier, the protective crystal on the magic carpet broke. However, it was not a big problem. Without the protective crystal, the magic carpet could still fly. It was just that the wind when it flew was a little strong. It felt like a level 14 storm. Su Len planned to take the magic carpet back and repair it. This thing was much more useful than the flying spell. Su Len looked at the material of the magic carpet. It should be a rune cloth. This kind of rune cloth was woven with special silk threads according to a certain method. Some special magic materials were mixed into it. The rune cloth was strong and beautiful. It also had good magical properties. It was usually used as a material for magic robes. Of course, this kind of rune cloth was also divided into different grades. It was different from the rune cloth used to make robes for wizard apprentices and low-level wizards. This rune cloth in front of him should be a high-grade material. After a simple inspection, Su Len put away the magic carpet. He then took the portal bags of the two wizards. With a flash of light in his hand, the defensive measures on the portal bags were directly broken. He poured out everything in the portal bags and began to search. In order to prevent any tracking methods, he needed to check everything. This kid is rich. Looking at the dazzling array of potions, enchanted materials, magic gems, scrolls, and so on, Su Len's eyes lit up. He quickly organized everything. Chapter 664. 63 pieces of high-quality magic gems, 21 bottles of various magic potions, and more than 300 pieces of magic crystals and energy crystals, for magic scrolls, 1 for escaping, 1 for banishing, and 2 for attacking. TSK, so rich. Su Len looked at the pile of items in front of him. The value of these things added up to at least 2 million kinnar. Killing and arson was indeed a golden belt. Su Len threw away the space bag with satisfaction, then put all the items into the storage space. Next, he opened another space bag. However, there were much fewer things in this space bag, far less than the previous one. But this was normal. After all, the guy just now should have a good background, so it was normal for him to have more good things and be richer. Soon, the two storage bags were completely cleaned. Su Len threw away all the daily necessities of the two people. These things were the best medium for prophecy spells. Although he was not afraid of the so-called Sage of Fire, he did not want to delay any longer. He had been away from home for more than 3 months, and he wanted to go home. He cleaned up the place skillfully. His technique was quite professional. Su Len left. Soon, he found the Pegasus and the little girl eating fruits in the forest. Then, he reached out and patted them on the head. "Well, I was busy there, and you two were eating secretly. "Ah, uncle, you're back." Seeing that it was Su Len, the little girl immediately pounced on him. "Hey, hey, don't come over." Seeing the little girl nibbling on the purple wild fruit and pouncing on him, the purple juice directly dyed his clothes into pieces. "Little girl, look at what you've done." Su Len reached out and tapped Vinia's head a few times. His originally white linen robe was covered in white and purple patches, and it was impossible to tell what it looked like before. He. The little girl raised her face and smiled at Su Len, her face still stained with purple juice. Su Len threatened her with a look of disgust. "Go and wash yourself clean, or I'll leave you here." As soon as she heard that they were leaving, the little girl quickly stuffed the fruit into her mouth. Her face was stuffed like a fat hamster. Then, she pulled up her sleeve and wiped her mouth back and forth a few times. She looked at Su Len, obviously saying that she had recovered. Su Len didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the little girl. He helplessly shook his head and snapped his fingers. With a flash of light, he activated the cleanse spell and cleaned the little girl's body. Reaching out, Su Len lifted the little girl up and placed her on the back of the Pegasus. Then, he mounted the Pegasus and left the Sunset Mountain Range, quickly flying towards the east. Just one day after he left, a figure quickly appeared in this area. This person rummaged around for a long time and finally found all the things that Su Luen had discarded. "Damn it. He's too far away. I can't track him anymore," the middle-aged man in a fiery red robe said with an ugly expression. "Who killed my son? I must find you and burn you to ashes. Now that all the clues are gone, we can only find that old witch if we want to find the murderer. Damn it," the middle-aged wizard said with gritted teeth. Then, he took the things he found and left the forest. "These people from the School of Prophecy are all vampires. I hope she doesn't disappoint me." As he said that, a flash of light flashed on the middle-aged wizard's body, and he flew in another direction. Su Len didn't know what happened after that, but even if he knew, he wouldn't care. If a legendary wizard wanted to die, Su Len wouldn't mind spending some time to bury him. As for the wizard from the School of Prophecy, Su Len wasn't worried at all. Prophecy was powerful, but it wasn't omnipotent. Hathaway was also a witch from the School of Prophecy, and Su Len had a deep understanding of the School of Prophecy. He was worried that his origin would be discovered, but the system on his body had hidden him, so prophecy spells were useless against him. Other than the system's shield, Su Len also used his own power to add a layer of camouflage to himself. With his current strength, let alone a legendary wizard, she couldn't even break through Sullen's shield. More importantly, casting prophecy spells on Su Len would backfire. If it was a normal prophecy spell, the backfire wouldn't be too strong. However, if it was a powerful prophecy spell, it would be very troublesome. Su Len didn't care about these things. Su Len took the little girl all the way through the Sunset Mountains, around the Swamp of Despair, and through the Sea of Death. After flying for tens of thousands of kilometers, they finally returned to the northern wasteland. They were basically home now. It took them more than a month to get there, but it only took them 5 days to get back. When they returned to the northern city, it had become even more prosperous after a few months. The inner city had become a large construction site. A large number of workers and golems were remodeling the northern city. The ground was dug up again, and magic crystals were installed. These were the energy channels of the floating city. Su Len didn't stop. He went straight to the North Wind Tower and saw Hathaway on the astrology platform. Su Len smiled, "I've gained a lot from my trip to the western end of the continent." Hathaway immediately saw the little girl behind Su Len, including this little girl. "Is she your daughter?" Su Len was speechless. "My daughter? My daughter isn't even born yet. I met her at the wizard fair. She has no family, so I brought her back." "She has no family at such a young age. How pitiful." Hessian looked at her without pity, then from today onwards, we are your family. Oh right, I've found the lava crystal you wanted. Seeing that the two were about to start chatting, Su Len quickly took out a fiery red crystal. As soon as the crystal appeared, the whole room became a little hot. The red crystal looked like a flame that had not been extinguished. A high-quality lava crystal. Su Len took out the lava crystal, and Hathaway immediately took it. After a simple examination, Hathaway said with satisfaction, "The purity is very high. This is already the highest quality. It should be enough to make an elemental fusion furnace." Hathaway said with a smile. "Then I'll leave the rest to you." Su Len said. "Oh right, her name is Vanya. She's a 5th grade talent like you. You can hand it to her yourself." 5th grade talent? Hessian's eyes lit up as he stared at the little girl. Such a good talent. Then learn from me. I will teach her to become a legendary wizard. Chapter 665. After Hathaway became a legendary wizard, the speed of her strength improvement slowed down. This was not because Hathaway did not work hard, but because Hathaway's inheritance of the Northern Witches had come to an end. The Northern Witches may have once been glorious, but in the past 1,000 years, the Northern Witches had been declining as a school of sorcerers. So their inheritance was now only at the legendary level. At present, the main inheritance of the Northern Witches was the divination school and the fire system. These two schools had complete inheritance and could be practiced all the way to the legendary level. Other schools, such as the water system, the ice system, and the spell system only had the level of high-grade wizards, and some inheritances were even only up to the intermediate wizard level. The difference between having inheritance and not having inheritance was still very big. Why did Hathaway's strength improve so quickly? The reason was simple. In addition to a lot of resources provided by Su Len, Hathaway's School of Cultivation had various notes and materials left behind by the predecessors. It was like a person learning the knowledge in the textbook, and there were also various classroom notes, 5 years of college entrance examination, 3 years of simulation, and many other materials to assist. Of course, the progress was faster. But these materials were all at the legendary level. After entering the legendary level, Hathaway had no follow-up practice methods, so from now on, she needed to create her own practice methods and then improve. The consequence was that the speed of advancement would slow down, but once she succeeded, this method was more powerful than following the footsteps of the predecessors. Along the way, as long as she succeeded, Hathaway would become a master of the generation. In the era of the Arcane Empire, she had the opportunity to become a great arcanist. The title of Great Arcanist was not just about strength. Strength was only one of the basic requirements. They were all the top masters who had created their own schools. Otherwise, those gods would not have been so afraid of these great arcanists. According to the level evaluation of the era of the Arcane Empire, the legendary was level 21, the high-grade legendary was level 26, and the great arcanist was level 45. At this level, it was already the realm of the gods. In addition to Hathaway's divination school, the fire system of cultivation school, and Sullen's thunder system, the school of cultivation of the wind element had recently been added. This wind element was added by Alex. As the Harpy Queen, the current queen of the winged people, Alex had a very thin bloodline of the ancient wind god. After integrating divinity, she had a deeper understanding of the rules of the wind element, and then she used her own strength to reverse deduce a wind element cultivation method. Of course, this method of cultivation was only at the legendary level, and the road after that needed Alex to explore. Sullen's current wizard level was actually far behind his own strength. He was now similar to Alex, using the power of divinity and the control of the law of lightning to reverse deduce. It was not so easy to reverse deduce a cultivation method. It required a lot of knowledge as a foundation. Since becoming a legendary, Su Len began to use all kinds of channels to collect knowledge. He either bought it from some wizards with inheritances or communicated with other wizard schools to deepen the foundation of the North Wind Tower. Fortunately, Su Len obtained a lot of wizard knowledge from the treasure chest. Through this knowledge, Su Len and the others continued to grow. Now, Hathaway and the others' strength could be said to be not weak among the legendary wizards. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was winter again. It was also on this day that the first batch of wizard apprentices in the North Wind Academy began to become Rank 1 wizards. After becoming a Rank 1 wizard, the previous contract they signed with the North Wind Academy would automatically become invalid. Next, these low-grade wizards would sign a new contract with the North Wind Academy. This kind of contract would be more relaxed, which also marked the beginning of the rise of the North Wind Academy. After all, in the past, the strength of the North Wind Academy depended on a few high-grade wizards. Now, the middle and low-grade wizards were slowly making up for it. While the North Wind Academy was growing stronger, the North Wind Duchy was also growing stronger. Ever since Su Len established the North Wind Duchy in the northern wastelands, the duchy had been constantly expanding. After a few years of development, the population of the North Wind Duchy had reached 600,000 before winter. The fastest developing city was Deepwater City. It had to be said that the sea trade had an amazing effect on the prosperity of a city. In just a year, the city had a population of around 100,000. Although the population of Deepwater City was growing fast, it was not as crazy as it was now. This situation was caused by Su Len leading the fleet to fight against the pirates. One had to know that merchants and pirates were natural enemies. The North Wind Tower fought against the pirates, which made the sea route prosperous at an amazing speed. Of course, most of the people in the city were sailors. The second most populous city in the North Wind Duchy was Mirror Lake City, which was south of Northtown City. Through continuous immigration, the population had reached 140,000. Mirror Lake City's climate was warmer, and there was a large mirror lake near the city with abundant water. Its future potential was no less than Northtown City's. The city with the lowest population in the North Wind Duchy was the new city. It was just built this year and only had a population of 80,000. After Sullen's fight against the pirates, more and more merchants came to Deepwater City to trade. At first, the merchants thought that the sea route was safe, but after coming here, they realized that the goods produced by Deepwater City were white sugar, paper, alcohol, weapons, and other goods in high demand. Deepwater City suddenly became very popular. Whether it was white sugar, paper, or alcohol, they were all very popular in other places. If it wasn't for Sullen's special restrictions, the merchants who came here would have packed up all the white sugar, paper, and alcohol. The weapons produced by the dwarves were also very popular. One had to know that the world had never been truly peaceful. Every year, there would be wars in various parts of the continent. Excellent weapons were never enough. Northtown City had a large number of grey dwarves. They provided many excellent weapons, which brought a considerable amount of income to Northtown City. After Deepwater City's port was opened, the demand for all kinds of goods in Northtown City increased. So far, the production of white sugar in Northtown City was 8 times higher than last year. Even so, the supply still couldn't meet the demand. The demand for alcohol and paper had also increased by several times. It should be known that the Deepwater port had only been open for half a year. According to the current growth rate, the demand for next year would increase by at least 3 to 5 times. Chapter 666. With such a huge demand, the Northtown City naturally had to produce at full capacity. Fortunately, Su Luen had been developing agriculture in the northern wastelands for the past few years. The entire North Wind Principality had already cultivated more than 1,000,000 mu of farmland. Of course, this number was not much compared to the farmland of other countries. It was much lower. According to the population, there were 600,000 people and 1,000,000 mu of farmland. On average, each person would get less than 2 mu of farmland. In his previous life, a few mu of farmland would be enough to feed a family. However, this was the Middle Ages, where technology was backward. Normally, even with a high-yield crop like potatoes, a family would need at least 30 mu of farmland. If all kinds of taxes were taken into account, this number would increase by 50 mu. After all, potatoes were not expensive. If one wanted to make money, they had to grow wheat and oats. Moreover, the feudal lords only collected a small part of the taxes. Most of the farmers in this world grew potatoes for their own consumption. Most of them grew wheat, barley, oats, and other crops. The yield of these 3 crops was not high. The reason why Northern Town could grow so many crops was because of the high yield per mu. The land in the northern wastelands was already quite fertile. With the addition of the harvest altar, the yield of wheat in Northern Town could reach 600 caddies per mu. Although there was a huge difference between the yield of 600 caddies per mu and the yield of 1,000 caddies per mu in his previous life, the wheat in his previous life had undergone professional breeding and the use of various fertilizers to reach 1,000 caddies per mu. There were no fertilizers in this world. Under normal circumstances, the yield of farmland in the southern provinces was around 300 caddies per mu. In the north, it was around 250 caddies per mu. Many barren lands only had 200 caddies per mu. The fact that Northern Town's farmland could reach 600 caddies per mu was already a miracle in this era. The main reason for this was the harvest altar. Apart from the harvest altar, Sulan also built a fertilizer factory. The manure produced in Northern Town would be collected and transported to the fertilizer factory to be fermented. After fermentation, it would be sent to the farmland. Although the fertilizer was not as good as the fertilizers, it was better than no fertilizers. With the help of the fertilizer and the harvest altar, Northern Town also planted a lot of cash crops in addition to food. Among them, the planting area of beets was the highest. After all, the demand for white sugar was too high. Moreover, the residue left after the sugar extraction of beets was not useless. These beet residue were also good fodder. At the same time, the sweet tea dregs were mixed with wheat bran, soybean dregs, and soybean dregs from extracting soybean oil. This was a very good feed. Centaur City currently had a total of several 100,000 horses, cows, and sheep, so the demand for feed was very high. The best horses would be used as war horses for Northern Town City, and the second best horses would be sold to other countries. However, even the second best horses were still good war horses. Normally, these war horses would be used by heavy cavalry. The second best horses would also be sold as war horses, and these horses would be used as normal war horses. The rest of the horses were used as draft horses or pack horses. North Town City also had horse plowing in addition to cattle plowing. Some of the other cows were used for plowing, while the rest were slaughtered as beef to supply the Duchy of North Wind. Because of the prosperity of the trade, North Town City consumed a lot of beef every day. Cowhide was also a good material. It could be used to make leather armor or other leather products. Cow tendons were also collected to make all kinds of bowstrings. It could be said that the value of a cow had been excavated to the limit. There was no need to talk about sheep. The north was cold, so sheepskin was an important tool for the commoners to resist the cold. Sulan even wanted to develop a wool textile industry, but Sulan didn't know anything about wool weaving, so he could only leave it to the gnomes who had experience in weaving. A large number of cows and sheep enriched the Duchy of North Wind's meat. At the same time, the manure produced by these cows and sheep was sent to the farm fertilizer factory to be fermented. It could be said that North Wind Duchy had formed a good ecological chain. After a few years of development, North Wind Duchy had become very rich in food. However, in order to continue to expand the sea trade, North Wind Duchy's various grain crops had to continue to expand. The planting area of beets was actually not enough. During this time, the amount of white sugar had increased several times. A part of it was from Northtown City's inventory, while the other part was the real production. Therefore, when planting beets this year, Northtown City once again expanded the planting area of beets. In the next few years, the planting area of beets would continue to expand. In addition to white sugar, Northtown City's production of alcohol and white paper would continue to expand. Alcohol was a little simpler because rum was made from the leftover caramel from the production of white sugar. As the production of white sugar increased, the production of rum would also increase. As for vodka, this kind of liquor was not very popular in the south, but it was very popular in the north. Now, in addition to these two kinds of alcohol, Northtown City had also started to brew iced wine, barley beer, and other drinks. However, the production of these drinks was still low. Paper was popular among the nobles. In order to produce paper, Su Len cut down a large number of trees near Mirror Lake City. At the same time, he was preparing to plant bamboo. Because bamboo grew quickly and had a lot of fiber, it was far more suitable for paper than plants. Su Len planned to plant a large number of bamboo to use as the raw material for paper. To Su Luan's surprise, he originally thought that the most popular paper should be various kinds of writing paper, but to his great surprise, the sales of writing paper could be said to be very poor. On the other hand, the sales of toilet paper, which he did not think highly of, continued to rise. It was simply unexpected. For this matter, Su Len purposely asked the merchants who bought paper. According to them, the preservation time of words written on paper was short, it was easy to damage, and it was not as strong as parchment. As for Su Len's claim that the paper was cheap, the same weight of paper could record more words, and it was more beneficial for the spread of knowledge. However, this claim was ridiculed by the merchants. According to the merchants, the nobles did not want more people to have knowledge. It was best for knowledge to be in the hands of people like them. Therefore, after seeing the advantages of paper, they ignored it. These aristocrats were just like the aristocratic families in ancient China in his previous life. They wanted to monopolize knowledge. After learning the reason for the unpopularity of writing paper, Su Luan was helpless. On the contrary, the popularity of toilet paper was the opposite. In the past, the nobles who used ropes, sticks, leaves, and other items decisively threw them away after trying toilet paper. Su Len did not know whether to laugh or cry. Papermaking did not bring about the spread of knowledge. Instead, it started a toilet revolution. Chapter 667. Although the nobles refused to use paper to write in order to prevent knowledge from being spread on a large scale, this method was only temporary. As paper spread more and more widely, more and more areas used this paper, and eventually, some people would use paper to write. After all, not all scholars were nobles. For merchants, the emergence of paper brought them great convenience. These merchants would not refuse to use paper to control the flow of knowledge like the nobles. They were more concerned about profits. As long as the price of parchment books remained high, there would be merchants who would use paper to copy and sell it at a slightly lower price. Don't think that these merchants would not dare. As long as there was enough profit, there was nothing that merchants would not sell. As long as there was money, they would even sell the ropes used to hang them. Not to mention books. The nobles' idea of blocking knowledge would only last for a while. Then, they would find that the number of paper books on the market had become a disaster. How high was the cost of making a parchment book? In this era, parchment was made from lambskin. A complete parchment was a small lamb. It was not easy to make a parchment. Not all kinds of lambskin could be made into parchment. Craftsmen would choose lambs of suitable age to make parchment. Generally, lambs were 2 to 3 years old. At the same time, they would observe the color of their fur. From experience, they knew that if the fur was pure white, the parchment would also be pure white. And if one wanted to make paper with a pleasing dark pattern, one would have to choose fur with stripes. In order to ensure the perfection of the paper, they also had to carefully check whether there were scars left by diseases or parasites. Generally speaking, only 1 out of 5 pieces of sheepskin would be suitable. To make parchment, the first step was to soak the parchment in clean water. At the same time, the hair on the parchment had to be removed. Lime powder and other things needed to be added. This process usually took 3 to 10 days. After washing, the parchment had to be stretched on a wooden board. At the same time, the hair on the parchment had to be shaved with a knife. After a series of steps, the parchment was considered complete. The price of such a piece of parchment was at least 1 kinnar. A book made entirely of parchment could cost up to 100 kinnar. Moreover, such parchment books were thick and heavy, but they did not record as much content as paper books. It was only a matter of time before they were replaced by paper. But so far, no businessman had done that. Perhaps someone had already done it secretly, but Sulen didn't know about it yet. Most of the activities in the Northwind Principality had come to a halt during the winter. The snowstorm in the northern wastelands was very cold. Traveling through the wastelands at this time was basically suicide. The hungry monsters in the wastelands were on the verge of going crazy from hunger. They were more dangerous than ever. During this period of time, the Northwind Principality's trade was basically suspended. Every year, there would be about 2 months of snow and wind. Therefore, during the winter, the Beifeng Duchy would cancel most outdoor work during this period of time. The people who didn't need to work would either go to the taverns to drink, go to the training grounds, or stay at home to make babies. Therefore, every winter in Beifeng Principality was an opportunity for its population to explode. Under normal circumstances, around August next year, the Northwind Principality would usher in a baby boom. Although the snowstorm had interrupted the Northwind Principality's trade for 2 months, and although it had lost a lot of income, it had also gained an opportunity for population growth. However, during this winter, although the other cities in the Northwind Principality had cancelled outdoor work, the Northtown city did not. The design of the floating city had been completed, and all kinds of renovation work were being carried out in an orderly manner. Therefore, the renovation work in the inner city of the Northtown city was not interrupted. Although the Northtown city was in the north, under the effect of the harvest altar, the city wasn't very cold. The renovation work could continue. In the inner city of the Northtown city, after a few months, the various factories that were originally in the inner city had all been moved out. For these factories, Sulen deliberately isolated an area in the outer city, where all the factories were located. The palace, which originally occupied the largest area in Sulen, had also been moved to the outer city. The floating city's area was limited, so Sulen had decided to live in the Northwind Tower. The land that was saved would be used to build other buildings. The first phase of the renovation of the floating city was progressing smoothly. The first phase of the renovation was more focused on the underground. Here, the underground network of the floating city would be laid out. The energy of the elemental furnace could enter all parts of the floating city through the underground network. By then, it would basically become a magic city. In the Northtown city, there were actually a lot of very good magic props, but it was still at the level of medieval civilization. For example, the magic lamp, which had been widely used as early as the era of the Arcane Empire, but until now, the magic lamp was only used inside the major wizard organizations and wizard towers. In addition to the price, there was also the energy needed for the magic lamp. Compared with the electricity in his previous life, the magic energy in this world was more violent and more difficult to control. In addition, stable and continuous energy was not easy to obtain. However, with the elemental furnace, the energy problem of the Northtown city was temporarily solved. After laying out the underground network, Sulen could even build rows of street lamps in the inner city. In his blueprint, the inner city of the elemental pool was more advanced than in his previous life. After all, many times, magic could do things that couldn't be done by technology in his previous life. Magic energy couldn't be used without restraint. Detailed planning must be done before use. No flaws were allowed in the underground network. It was a very large project. Sulen and Hathaway did a cost calculation. It would cost about 10 to 20 million kinnar to complete it. Fortunately, Sulen had been making money in various ways. He had obtained hundreds of millions of kinnar from the southern pirates, and this time, he had made a lot of money in the west of the continent. All of these together were basically enough to cover the cost of the first phase of the floating city. The second phase of the project required the income of the Northtown city. The income of the Northtown city was now very high. In addition to the various ore production in the underground world and the production of the secret realm, as well as some extra income that Sulen got from time to time, the second phase of the project was estimated to be enough. Transforming the floating city didn't require all the money at once. It was continuous, so the pressure on resources was not so tight. The second phase of the project would build a complete ecological balance system and the living system of the floating city. Chapter 668. North Wind Tower, Astrology Platform. Sulen had been studying legendary spells all this time. The last time the Northwind Tower traded with the Stellar Tower, in addition to obtaining some legendary grade knowledge, they also obtained several legendary grade spells. The spells he was studying now were Sword of Annihilation, Time Stop, Chain of Accidents, Mage's Disjunction, Imprison, and so on. Some of these spells were exchanged, and some were inherited from Hathaway and the others. The number was not small. Legendary spells were difficult to learn. Even Sulen had no way to master them quickly, unless he was willing to spend legendary skill points to learn them. With just one legendary skill point, he could master a legendary spell quickly. The flying magic carpet brought back by Sulen was very popular, second only to the magic pearls he took out. As soon as the flying magic carpet was taken out, it was confiscated by Hathaway. She was going to analyze the flying magic carpet and then recreate it. The flying magic carpet was still very popular. It was faster than flying and more flexible than floating ships. It could carry up to 6 people and was very suitable for transportation. It could also be sold to make money. It could be said that as Sulen grew stronger, he needed more money. Wizards were too good at spending money. Not to mention the usual various experiments, the money spent on them was already an unimaginable number for ordinary people. Let's talk about the floating city. It was no exaggeration to say that the entire floating city was piled up with money. Most adepts spent money faster than they could earn money. The floating city project was basically equivalent to a country building a space station in his previous life. It was very difficult for a country, and the difficulty of building a floating city was equivalent to interstellar colonization. All kinds of research, all kinds of materials, and the speed of burning money was simply too fast. Hathaway basically spent tens of thousands of kinnar to conduct an experiment. In a month, at least 6 experiments of this scale would need to be done. If it were not for the materials produced in the secret realm, North Town would have been worn out. More than 70% of these experiments yielded no results, but you had to do it. It was basically burning money. This was also because Sulen was good at making money. Ordinary people really couldn't handle this prodigal woman. If it was just an experiment, it would be fine. If there were no results, it would just continue to burn money. However, once there was a breakthrough, the speed of burning money would increase exponentially. The Kinnar was like the Red Sand River outside North Town. The river water was converted into gold coins, which flowed out. At this time, Sulen did not even dare to ask. His heart ached too much. Of course, there was someone who felt even more heartache than Sulen. It was the red dragon Onyxvia. It could be said that she suffered even more than Sulen. Before she went to sleep, she checked that the treasury was full of gold. When she woke up, she suddenly realized that it was so spacious. My huge mountain of gold is gone with a whoosh. It wasn't difficult to make a magic carpet. Compared to the floating space tower and the floating space city, it was only slightly more difficult. So, after some research, Hathaway quickly made a new magic carpet. Then it got out of hand. From Chris to Phyllis, including Sandy, Angela, and Anna, everyone had a magic carpet. This directly led to the frequent appearance of magic carpets in the sky of North Town during this period of time. Not only did Hathaway make a new magic carpet, but she also made some improvements to the magic carpet, which made it faster and more stable when flying. At the same time, the protective spells on the magic carpet were stronger, and the energy consumption was not much increased. The cost of such a magic carpet was 80,000 kinnar. The North Wind Tower was selling it at 300,000 kinnar, which was the normal price of a magic carpet. It had to be said that the wizards were really ruthless. In addition to the magic carpet, Hathaway had another product, which was the floating space ship. While studying the production of the magic carpet, Hathaway also studied the floating space ship. To be honest, after the floating space tower was built, the floating space ship was basically not difficult to make. The most important thing on the floating space ship was the floating space ring. In addition to the floating space ring, there was the energy system and the protective system. The energy system of the floating space ship was a bit troublesome. After all, it was not like the floating space tower, which could build an elemental pool. As for building an elemental pool in the floating space ship, not to mention other things, the cost alone was very high. A miniaturized elemental pool would cost at least 200,000 kinnar to barely make it. In addition to some other materials, the cost of a floating space ship would be at least 800,000 kinnar, and the price would be even higher. Such an expensive price was not suitable to be used as a tool of trade. However, when studying the magic carpet, Hathaway prepared another plan, which was to use energy crystals to drive it. At the same time, she also built an energy-gathering rune array on the floating space ship, which could gather the elemental energy in the air into the floating space tower. After doing so, the floating space ship's endurance would be reduced. However, the advantage was that the transportation cost would be reduced. From Sullen's point of view, the floating space ship was not very cost-effective for transportation. However, as soon as the floating space ship appeared, many businessmen saw a business opportunity and bought it at a high price. After completing the research on the floating space ship and the flying magic carpet, Hathaway no longer cared about these things. Instead, she continued to study the elemental fusion furnace. The elemental fusion furnace was very dangerous, and she had to be careful. Once there was any problem, it would cause very serious consequences. If this thing were to accidentally explode, the entire North Town city would be reduced to nothing. The function of the lava crystal that Sulen brought back this time was to make the elemental fusion furnace more resistant and sturdier. The principal experiment of the elemental fusion furnace had been completed long ago, and the technical difficulties were almost solved after Hathaway's research. After Sulen prepared all kinds of raw materials, the construction of the elemental fusion furnace began officially. The elemental fusion furnace was the core of the entire floating space city. Only with the elemental fusion furnace, the floating space city could fly. Of course, if you found the mice energy core that had been passed down from the Arcane Empire, you could fly without building an elemental fusion furnace. Moreover, the mice energy core had another advantage, which was that it did not consume fuel. The mice energy core could directly extract a steady stream of energy, which was more useful than the elemental fusion furnace. Only the elemental annihilation furnace could be slightly better. Chapter 669. As the ice and snow melted, the northern wasteland became lively again. The caravans that had endured the winter began to prepare for departure as soon as the ice and snow melted. Although the weather was still a little cold at this time, the road from the northern provinces to the northern wasteland would become muddy and very difficult to walk on once the ice and snow completely melted. Therefore, the experienced caravans would set off a little earlier. After entering the Beifeng Principality, the road was completely different. The Beifeng Principality had a special interest in road construction. They connected all the cities in the Beifeng Principality with stone roads. According to them, these were official roads. The official roads in the Beifeng Principality were very extravagant. In Old Han's opinion, this was completely a waste of money. The average width of the official roads in the Beifeng Principality was 6 meters, which could easily accommodate 4 carriages side by side. This was something that the roads in many cities in other countries on the continent could not compare to. As the ice and snow melted, the migration to the Beifeng Principality began again. According to Sullan's idea, the Beifeng Principality needed at least 1 million people in a short period of time. In order to develop the northern wasteland, they needed at least 10 to 20 million people. This was a long-term mission that could last for decades. In addition to the migration in the northern wasteland, the Deepwater City also opened up a migration route. Due to the warm climate, developed commerce, relatively stable society, and high food production, the countries in the southern seas developed very quickly. At the same time, the population of these countries also increased rapidly. However, the good natural conditions and environment did not only bring benefits. The world's productivity was only around the medieval era. There were no large-scale factories, so it was impossible to absorb too many people. The amount of land was also very limited. The nobles would not spend more money to hire more farmers. As a result, these countries had a large number of idle people. In order to survive, many people chose to become sailors or pirates. After all, the navigation technology of this era was very dangerous every time they went out to sea. But even so, there were still a large number of people that could not be settled. These people also became a hidden danger to the stability of the cities. After Sulan discovered this, he ordered Deepwater City to plan the migration in those places. Anyone who was willing to immigrate to the Beifeng Principality would be given 10 mu of farmland as long as they worked for the Beifeng Principality for 3 years. In addition to the 10 mu of farmland, the government would build a house for them and they would also have the right to open up 50 mu of farmland. The farmland obtained from the open-up land would be exempt from taxes for 3 years, and only half of the taxes would be collected for 5 years. As for why Sulan didn't offer better terms, it was because the terms he offered were too good. No one would believe him. They would only think that he was a liar. He said that as long as you let him go, he would give you 50 mu of land, a house, and tax exemption. Then they would board the ship, leave the port and sell these people as slaves. This kind of thing had happened many times before. Being on a ship was different from being on land. Once you were on a ship, you had to listen to what others said. In the past, many slave traders used this kind of deceit to make a fortune. In the beginning, when Deepwater City's immigrant ships came to the Southern Sea to recruit immigrants, they offered very good conditions. However, very few people came to sign up, and many people didn't even come after signing up. After seeing this situation, Deepwater City's immigration officials were confused. They even raised the immigration conditions again, but in the end, fewer people came. The immigration officials who didn't understand the situation finally found some people who were familiar with the situation to act as consultants. With the help of these people, they lowered the immigration standards and successfully carried out the immigration. Now, Deepwater City's immigration officials went one step further. They were now cooperating with the nobles of the Southern Sea City. These nobles were basically very powerful in the local area. For these nobles, the large number of refugees in the city was a completely unstable factor. They were very happy that Deepwater City was willing to accept these refugees. At the same time, Deepwater City's immigration officials also said that they could use white sugar, toilet paper, and rum in exchange. When the nobles heard that they could use the refugees, who were useless and would even affect the stability of the society. To exchange for these goods, the nobles went crazy. They directly sent troops to capture the refugees in their territories. Translator, WQL Editor, Alim. The immigration route of Deepwater City was very busy. At its peak, 16 ships were delivered to Deepwater City in one day. About 400 people were loaded on the ships every day. About 6,000 to 7,000 immigrants were delivered in one day. With this kind of cooperation, the number of immigrants increased rapidly. On average, Deepwater City could immigrate 120,000 to 130,000 people a month. After these immigrants arrived in Deepwater City, apart from a portion of them staying at the port to support the city's construction, the rest were sent to Northern Town. Then, Northern Town would distribute them to Mirror Lake City and the new city. The arrival of a large number of people put pressure on the North Town city. All kinds of living materials were consumed quickly. The most urgent thing was food. Fortunately, Su Luan had always been very careful, so the North Town city stored a large amount of food every year. It was also because of this food that Su Len dared to immigrate so many people. Because of the harvest altar in Northern Town, the production of food was very high. 1 mu of land could produce 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of potatoes. In Northern Town, Su Len planted 500,000 mu of potatoes. The output of potatoes alone was enough to feed 1 million people for a year. Moreover, potatoes could be planted in Northwind Principality for 2 seasons. In addition to the fish and various kinds of beef and mutton around Northern Town, it could be said that Northern Town had enough strength to feed these immigrants. As long as they could survive the first year, the food production in Northern Town would increase. Basically, they didn't have to worry about not having enough food. However, the large number of immigrants also brought a lot of problems. For example, there wasn't enough housing, and there was a serious shortage of grassroots officials. With the arrival of these new immigrants, the city's environment began to deteriorate. These immigrants didn't have any hygiene awareness. It was common for them to urinate and defecate everywhere. Originally, it was the grassroots officials who trained them. However, there were too many immigrants. Northern Town was seriously understaffed. At the same time, many immigrants took advantage of the lack of manpower in Northern Town and began to commit all kinds of crimes. Many of these immigrants used to be gang members. When they saw that Northwind Principality was prosperous and didn't have any gangs, they were overjoyed. They quickly contacted their old friends to form gangs and divide the territory. However, they didn't expect Su Len to attach so much importance to the safety of the city. After discovering that the grassroots officials were understaffed, they immediately called in the army of Northern Town to help maintain order. Chapter 670. In the laboratory, Sullen's figure appeared in the teleportation array with a flash of magic light. "Do you have juice? Quick, give me a glass. I want it iced." Su Len shouted as soon as he walked out of the teleportation array. A clay golem next to him immediately went to prepare it. "How is it? Is it solved?" Hathaway didn't raise her head as she wrote and drew on the table. "It's solved for the time being." Su Len sat down on the chair next to him, took the juice from the clay golem, and then raised his head to drink it. Phew! It's so comfortable. Su Len drank the iced juice in one gulp and then breathed a sigh of relief with a relaxed expression. "It's solved for the time being?" Hathaway said with some surprise. "Yes, it's only solved for the time being." Su Len shook his head and said, "The number of immigrants is too large now, and the number of grassroots officials is seriously insufficient. Although I have ordered more students to be recruited for training, it will take at least 3 months for this group of people to complete the training. And even if this group of people completes the training, the number of grassroots officials will be lacking in time. The growth of our grassroots officials can't keep up with the number of immigrants." Su Len said helplessly. We need to expand the training school for grassroots officials. Hathaway also realized the trouble of the matter. I also thought of this, but the problem is that we have a serious shortage of teachers and can't expand the scale of the school. However, I have asked the immigration officials of Deepwater City to recruit scholars from the south. I believe the first batch of scholars will arrive soon. We can promote some people from those immigrants. There should be some suitable people among these immigrants. I remember that during the immigration process, these immigrants have been divided into different groups. Those group leaders can play a role. Hathaway thought for a moment and said, "We can conduct emergency training for these group leaders. They don't need to be strong, as long as they can complete some simple tasks and reduce the burden of grassroots officials. By the way, some of the soldiers in northern Battlefront City can also be transferred to deal with emergencies. You should know that the soldiers in northern Battlefront City are basically elites, obedient, and highly disciplined. They can temporarily serve as grassroots officials." Hathaway quickly came up with a solution. "Sure." Sulen agreed after thinking for a while. The army in North Town City was indeed elite. These soldiers had gone through strict training. They were very good at obeying orders and executing orders. After some simple training, they would be able to do the work of the grassroots officials. Of course, it was only a temporary measure. The best way was to let the grassroots officials do the work. What they needed to do now was to continuously expand the number of people the academy could recruit. "Well, that's it for the time being," Sulen said. "By the way, how's your experiment going?" "We've already started the first experiment," Hathaway said with a smile. After several years of research, the elemental fusion furnace was ready to be officially tested. Of course, the experimental elemental fusion furnace was much smaller, only about 1% of the energy efficiency of a real elemental fusion furnace. This was naturally done to prevent the explosion of the elemental furnace from causing serious damage. I'm planning to put the experiment in the half-plane we've established. That way, even if the experiment fails, and the elemental fusion furnace explodes, it won't cause any damage to the material world or the city, Hathaway said. "Alright, I agree. But I have to go with you to the experiment. You have to stand at a safe distance during the experiment," Sulen emphasized. "Alright." Hathaway nodded in agreement. "This is the experimental version of the elemental fusion furnace I just made." Hathaway snapped her fingers. A space portal opened. Inside the portal was something that looked a little rough and strange. "It looks so ugly," Sulen said with a frown. "It can't be helped. This is only the first version of the experiment. It will definitely be improved in the future. By then, it will look even prettier. Of course, we should be more concerned about whether this equipment can work properly or not," Hathaway said after hearing Sulen's words, rolling her eyes at him. "Alright, as long as the experiment is successful, I can accept it even if it's a little uglier," Sulen said with a shrug. Plane portal. A flash of light descended from the sky and directly tore through space. Sulen and Hathaway entered the plane one after the other. This plane was the half-plane that Sulen and Hathaway had opened together. At this time, the half-plane was already 3 kilometers wide. The half-plane still looked very simple. The ground was dry, the gravity was very low, and the water source was obviously smaller. It would take at least a few hundred years to transform this half-plane into an existence that was not inferior to the material plane. But now, the simple environment here was just right for the experiment. "The rock golems are ready. Let them move the elemental furnace over," Sulen kept urging. Soon, the 2 rock golems carefully moved the elemental furnace over. After arriving at the center of the half-plane, Hathaway did not immediately start the experiment. Instead, she began to set up various defensive runic circles around the elemental furnace. These defensive runic circles would reduce the power of the explosion of the experimental model layer by layer. After all, the half-plane was not large. If it really exploded, these defensive measures would minimize the damage. Although Su Len agreed to use the half-plane as a test site, he did not want the half-plane to collapse in the event of an explosion. After all, it was very safe to open a half-plane house. After confirming, Hathaway put a small spoonful of elemental fuel into the elemental fusion furnace. Next was the most crucial moment. Elemental fusion furnace number 1 experimental body is undergoing actual combat training. System self-check is in progress. System self-check has been completed. Connecting the energy channel. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. All the tests were completed. The elemental fusion furnace experimental body was quickly completed. Hathaway took a deep breath and suddenly opened her eyes. Begin. Elemental fusion furnace number 1 experimental body is in operation. Igniting. An extremely dazzling light fell from the sky. This light beam fell from the sky and instantly hit the fuel in the elemental furnace. The fuel in the elemental furnace was ignited by the light beam and instantly started working. A powerful elemental energy quickly appeared. In just a few minutes, it reached an astonishing level. Then, a shocking amount of energy surged out of the energy channels connected to the elemental furnace. This energy was quickly injected into the half-plane under the effect of the elemental runic circles. With the injection of this energy, the half-plane slowly began to expand. Chapter 671. Light blue elemental energy gushed out of the elemental fusion furnace. The furnace began to operate normally, and large amounts of energy continued to pour out, causing the semiplane to expand. The elemental fusion furnace continued to pour out huge amounts of energy. In just a short while, the amount of energy gushing out had already exceeded the energy consumption of a level 9 spell. According to this standard, the elemental fusion furnace could produce 10 times more energy than an elemental fission furnace in the same amount of time. This was only because the elemental fusion furnace was only an experimental version. If it were an actual elemental fusion furnace, its energy output would be dozens of times greater. As the elemental energy continued to pour out, the semiplane expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. Su Len and Hathaway did not relax in the slightest. Although the elemental fusion furnace had been operating well for a while, no one could be sure that it was safe before the experiment was completed. Elemental furnace current load is 60%. Current operation is normal. Energy transmission is normal. Elemental furnace target room temperature is 28 million degrees, the temperature is still rising. Binding force field is stable. Elemental combustion is accelerating. Streams of data were constantly being collected, and then appeared on the virtual screen in front of them. On the other side of the virtual screen was a three-dimensional model of the elemental fusion furnace. Every part of the model had a different color, and these colors represented the current state of the elemental furnace. Everything is operating normally now. We can consider increasing the power output. Alex said after confirming that all the data were normal. From the beginning until now, the elemental furnace has been operating according to our plan. We can try increasing the power output. Hathaway said seriously. Then let's begin. Su Len said with a serious expression. Begin pressurizing. With Hathaway's command, the elemental furnace continued to pressurize. The energy binding force field restrained the energy produced by the elemental fusion to the center, and the temperature of the elemental furnace began to rise. Elemental fusion furnace temperature is rising. Current temperature is 32 million degrees. Energy binding force field is operating normally. Elemental furnace output is increasing. Energy channel is operating normally. Current load is 65%. Elemental fuel combustion is accelerating. Searing beam, activate. As the order was given, scorching rays of extremely high temperature were instantly activated, and then heated up the center of the energy-binding force field. If one were to observe the interior of the elemental furnace at this time, they would discover that it was as if a small sun had risen inside. Unimaginable light and heat were being emitted from this sun, and a heart-palpitating energy was spreading from here. The originally astonishing energy increased once again. In the monitoring runic array set up by Hathaway, the demiplane's expansion speed increased once again, and the entire demiplane's energy fluctuations were abnormally active. On the virtual projection, the original projection of the elemental furnace began to change. Originally, most of the projections of the elemental furnace were green or blue, but after the increase in efficiency, the color gradually began to change to yellow. As the energy core of the floating space city, the elemental furnace was the energy source of the entire floating space city. The amount of energy it needed to provide was astonishing. How heavy was a city? A floating space tower alone weighed millions of tons. In comparison, the larger floating space city weighed at least hundreds of millions of tons. The amount of energy needed to lift such a heavy object was astonishing, and just lifting it was not enough. The elemental furnace needed to steadily supply energy to the floating space city for a long time, so the requirements for the elemental furnace were even higher. In the period of the ancient arcane empire, only the mice energy nucleus could do this. The mice energy nucleus was a miracle creation that Sulen did not know its specific structure and operation method until now. It did not need to be added with dyes, it was completely clean and pollution-free, and its operation was stable, and its energy output was gentle. It could be said to be a very ideal energy core. It was said that this energy core was made by the goddess of magic and some great arcanists, and it used the power of the magic net. The mice energy nucleus was a hub in the magic net. The magic net was a power woven by the goddess of magic that covered the entire demi-plane. The existence of the magic net made the originally free and violent elemental energy calm down and tame the energy. This big net that covered the demi-plane could control an amazing amount of energy. From the age of thorium to the early period of the Arcane Empire, all the floating space cities relied on the magic net and the mice energy nucleus. The reason for the end of the age of thorium was that a great arcanist at that time coveted the authority of the gods and wanted to seize control of the magic net. As a result, the moment he succeeded, the magic net exploded, leading to the collapse of the magic net on the material plane. This sudden disaster directly caused the floating space cities of the age of thorium to fall from the sky. At the same time, the collapse of the magic net also caused a large number of arcanists to be unable to cast spells. Only a few talented arcanists had a leap in their strength. By the time of the Arcane Empire, the arcanists learned the lesson of the destruction of the age of thorium and began to create energy hubs that did not rely on the magic net. The elemental furnace was born on this basis. Because of the great arcanist, the gravedigger of the age of thorium, the goddess of magic blocked spells above the 10th circle, and at the same time, blocked a lot of knowledge. The arcanists once again established a glorious arcane civilization from the ruins of the age of thorium. However, the floating space cities were still not solved. The only floating space cities were basically built together with the goddess of magic. Some wizards also found one or two complete mice energy nuclei from the ruins of the age of thorium. In order to develop another energy source that could replace the mice energy nucleus, these arcanists also began to study the power of the magic net. After in-depth study of the magic net created by the goddess of magic, these great arcanists combined the characteristics of the magic net with the riddles after many years of research and finally created something very similar to the magic net. This was called the artificial magic net, but unlike the magic net of the goddess of magic, which could cover the material plane, the artificial magic net could only cover an area of 50 kilometers around the floating space tower. But even so, the power of this artificial magic net was extremely amazing. In the artificial magic net, the great arcanists did not have to worry about the lack of magic power at all. The artificial magic net could provide almost endless energy. This was also the reason why the great arcanists during the Arcane Empire could rival the gods. Chapter 672. The reason why the gods were powerful, in addition to their amazing power, was that their god's kingdom could provide them with a steady stream of divine power. Although the divine power possessed by the gods themselves was huge, it was also limited. However, the gods could continuously replenish their divine power through their god's kingdom. As long as the divine power in their god's kingdom was not exhausted, their divine power would not dry up. After the great arcanists had the artificial magic net, they also had the power similar to the gods. As long as they were in the range of the artificial magic net, the great arcanists could get a steady stream of divine power. In addition to the artificial magic net, another important core was the elemental furnace. The development of the elemental furnace was very difficult. After all, magic energy was a very violent energy, and a little carelessness could cause serious consequences. In history, there had been several energy leaks in the floating city of the Arcane Kingdom, which had led to serious consequences. The most serious case even directly led to the abandonment of a floating city. This kind of energy pollution was also very serious to the natural world. At that time, the great arcanists of the Arcane Kingdom spent a lot of time and methods to solve the pollution perfectly. This also led to the conflict between the arcanists and the druids. As druids, they were very dissatisfied with the great arcanists' wanton destruction of the natural environment and pollution. If the Arcane Kingdom was not so strong, the druids would have already gone to war with them. However, the arcanists finally realized that there was a problem after causing a serious leak. Thus, they created an extremely strict safety protocol. They also stipulated that excessive pollution experiments were prohibited in the material plane. Experiments such as the elemental furnace were not supposed to be carried out in the material plane. Later, after the destruction of the Arcane Kingdom, some other races wanted to get the strong power of the Arcane Kingdom, so they secretly organized people to do research, but there was almost no good end for them. The most famous was the dwarves. These greedy guys were very envious after seeing the almost endless energy of the arcane furnace, and then they wanted to master this power. At the same time, they made some changes according to the elemental furnace. These dwarves secretly built a huge golem in Furnace Core Castle. The golem was more than 10 meters tall and had astonishing power. If these dwarves succeeded, they would definitely become the overlord of a region. It wouldn't be impossible for them to rule the entire continent. However, the dwarves' experiment was a complete failure. It was said that the elemental furnace had a big explosion, and the whole furnace castle was blown beyond recognition. The whole city was destroyed in this loud noise. At the same time, the explosion also caused serious pollution. The refugees who survived the explosion fell sick and died from the terrible pollution. The largest city of the dwarves, Hearthcore Castle, home to more than 100,000 people, was completely destroyed. At the same time, the aftermath wasn't over yet. After the destruction of Furnace Fortress, the explosion of the elemental furnace directly pierced through the ground, waking up the terrifying flame fiend that had been sleeping in the depths of the earth since the last era. The awakened flame fiends began to attack the surviving dwarves. Under such circumstances, Furnace City was directly destroyed. The once powerful dwarf kingdom fell apart in this disaster. It was also from this day onwards that the dwarf kingdom was divided into 7 parts. Because of all kinds of conflicts and interests, these dwarves began to stray further and further away. There were even a few dwarves who had become enemies. In addition to the explosion caused by the dwarves' research, there were many people on the continent who wanted to obtain the craftsmanship of the Arcane Empire. The wizards had inherited most of the magic power, but they had never succeeded in creating such a dangerous elemental furnace. In the past, many wizard schools had wanted to create such an elemental furnace and had conducted experiments. To prevent accidents, these people had purposely chosen deserts to conduct their experiments. Naturally, they had also failed. As a result, the elemental furnace had been abandoned. The elemental furnace continued to operate. Massive amounts of elemental energy continuously surged out of the furnace, and the energy in the pseudoplane became more and more abundant. Elemental furnace operating normally. Energy channel operating normally. Energy channel not overloaded. Energy binding force field operating normally. Elemental fusion furnace load reached 73%. Elemental furnace operating normally. As the voice of Tower Spirit number 1 rang out, various indicators of the elemental furnace appeared in front of him. As the elemental furnace continued to operate, so did the numbers. Elemental fusion furnace temperature rising. Current temperature is 52 million degrees. Energy binding force field operating normally. Energy output from elemental furnace increasing. Energy channel operating normally. Current load is at 82%. Elemental fuel burning increasing. As time passed, more and more elemental energy was transported to other parts of the pseudoplane by the energy channel. Compared to the beginning, the pseudoplane had expanded many times. The pseudoplane was originally only 3 kilometers in diameter, but with the powerful energy supply from the elemental furnace, it had reached a shocking 10 kilometers in diameter. It only took him 2 to 3 hours to do so. The growth rate of a pseudoplane like this was extremely shocking. Sufficient energy was pushing the pseudoplane to expand. Beep beep beep. Elemental furnace load has reached 85%. Elemental furnace operating normally. Energy binding force field fluctuating. Increasing energy binding force field. At this moment, a notification sounded. Sulen, Hathaway, and Alex looked at the elemental furnace nervously. After reaching 85% of the energy load, the elemental furnace finally had some minor problems, but it was quickly improved. Continue to increase the load. Sulen glanced at the elemental fusion furnace and said. Success or failure depends on this. Okay. Hathaway nodded vigorously. With Hathaway's command, the elemental furnace began to increase its efficiency again. Continue to increase the load. On the elemental furnace model, the original green and blue had completely disappeared, replaced by yellow and red. It was still increasing. The load of the elemental furnace also began to increase, and soon reached 95%. Seeing this, Hathaway took a deep breath and ordered to continue increasing it. At this moment, a large area of red suddenly appeared on the elemental furnace model. At the same time, Tower Spirit number 1 began to sound the alarm. Warning, warning, the elemental furnace is collapsing. Immediately stop the experiment, boom. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.